The Billionaire Who Cancelled Christmas Part 1. Chapter 1: The Snowstorm That Changes Everything. The door locked behind her with a quiet, final click, and Harper Meadows realized she had just stepped into someone else's life. Outside, Aspen was disappearing. Snow wasn't just falling, it was sweeping sideways in furious sheets, scratching at the glass like it had a personal grudge. The sky was a flat, unbroken gray, the kind that made you feel like the world had been erased and someone forgot to draw it back in. The wind howled around the hulking shape of the mountain resort, rattling the huge wooden doors like it wanted in. Harper stood just inside the entrance, lungs burning from the cold, camera bag slipping off her shoulder, curls damp and dusted with snowflakes that melted in her hair. Her heart was still racing from the drive up. Drive was generous, it had been 80% praying and 20% steering. Okay, she muttered to herself, wiping melting snow off her lashes with the back of her glove. So, I did not die in a snowbank. That's a win. She turned around. And for a moment, she forgot the storm. The lobby of the Hale Summit Resort looked like something ripped directly from a winter fairy tale and upgraded with billionaire money. Vaulted ceilings rose high overhead, carved beams stretching up into shadows. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, a real fire crackling inside it, throwing waves of golden heat across polished dark wood floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the mountain slope, but the storm had smeared the view into a blurry white curtain. Snow tapped against the glass like impatient fingers. Harper's cheeks stung as warmth crept back into them. Her hands tingled. Her camera bag thunked gently against her hip as she turned in a slow circle, taking it all in, the soft leather couches, the thick rugs, the modern chandelier glinting overhead like frozen raindrops. And everywhere, hints of a holiday the building seemed reluctant to admit it was having. There was a tree near the far corner. Not the kind Harper expected in a high-end resort, no 12-foot statement monster dripping with ornaments and ego. This tree looked like it had been negotiated into existence. It was perfectly shaped, yes, but sparsely decorated, white lights, a few silver ornaments, a ribbon that wound around it like it had changed its mind halfway down. No garlands. No wreaths. No giant nutcracker soldiers guarding the door. Nothing loud. Nothing joyful. It was Christmas, but whispered. Wow, Harper breathed, a puff of air in the quiet. The quiet answered back. She frowned. For a place like this, the kind of resort that showed up in glossy magazine spreads and 10 places to spend the holidays if you hate normal budgets lists, she expected, people. Luggage. Bellboys. The low hum of rich tourists pretending their lives weren't stressful. Instead, the lobby felt, paused. The reception desk sat under a sweeping staircase, all sleek dark wood and brushed brass, with a tiny vase of white winter roses placed with surgical precision in the center. The computer was on. A little brass bell waited patiently on the counter. No one behind it. Hello. Harper called, her voice bouncing off the beams overhead. Hi. Guest. Very lost, very cold, very into central heating. Nothing. The fire crackled. Somewhere deeper inside the lodge, something mechanical hummed. The storm roared louder outside, making the silence inside feel even more deliberate. Harper swallowed. Okay. Fine. Maybe they were short-staffed. Maybe this was one of those boutique minimal contact places that advertised serenity and meant good luck, figure it out. She pulled off her gloves, shoving them into her coat pockets, then dropped her camera bag on the floor beside her feet. Her fingers, still pink and stiff from the cold, drummed lightly on the reception desk bell. Ding! The sound shot through the lobby like a guilty secret. She winced. Wow. Okay. Sorry, Belle. Didn't mean to be aggressive. Still nothing. Her eyes slid to the computer screen behind the desk. The resort's logo, a stylized H with a mountain line through it, glowed in the corner. A screensaver bounced across it, snowy peaks, sunrises, luxurious suites with unobstructed views, perfectly staged couples holding champagne glasses and laughing at nothing. All of it looked like the life Harper had always been hired to capture but never had time to live. She felt the familiar flutter in her chest, the one that always came when she arrived somewhere new, camera ready, world open. It was equal parts adrenaline and curiosity, the feeling that anything could happen, and it probably would if she pressed the shutter at the right second. She tugged the strap of her camera bag fondly. Well, Hale Summit, I came for the photos, she said softly. If you could supply a human being, that'd be amazing. Her phone buzzed weakly in her coat pocket. She tugged it out, thumb already swiping at the screen. No service. Of course, she muttered. Naturally. Amazing. A weather alert banner still sat at the top from the last patch of signal she'd had on the drive up. Blizzard warning, travel strongly discouraged. Mountain pass closures likely. Likely, they said, she grumbled. Great time to go be creative in the mountains, Harper. Genius. This trip had not been optional, though. She'd landed the job 2 weeks ago, a last-minute assignment from a small travel magazine that couldn't afford the big-name photographers but still wanted glossy shots of Aspen's quiet side. The editor had sounded frazzled on the phone, juggling deadlines, budgets, and panic. We just need cozy. Winter. Authentic. Not staged commercial stuff. Think hidden gem in the snow, she had said. We'll cover your stay if you can get up there. Harper had looked at her bank account balance, which had been sitting at cozy in the way an empty fridge was minimalist, and said yes before she'd even checked the forecast. Now, standing in the vast, echoing lobby of a resort that felt too expensive for her boots to touch the floor, she tried to ignore the tiny little knot in her stomach, whispering, "What if you're not supposed to be here?" She leaned over the counter, not crossing it, but stretching just enough to peek into the office behind it. A sleek printer. A coat thrown over the back of a chair. A half-drunk mug of coffee. "Hello," she called again, louder. "I promise I am not a burglar. My parallel parking is criminal, but that's it. Nothing." Her eyes drifted back to the tree. The lights on it twinkled lazily, their reflection dancing across the polished glass behind it. There was something half-hearted about it, like whoever decorated it had been following instructions rather than enjoying it. She moved toward it slowly, drawn like a moth to a battery-powered flame. The ornaments were all similar, delicate silver spheres, frosted glass stars, a few clear baubles filled with fake snow, and tiny sprigs of pine. No mismatched childhood ornaments, no kid-made disasters, nothing sentimental. It was beautiful, but sterile. "You're pretty," Harper told it anyway, reaching out to lightly touch one of the ornaments. It swung gently, catching the light. "You look like you asked for color and someone gave you corporate winter mood board instead." She smiled to herself, the kind that didn't quite make it all the way to her eyes. She was used to this, in a way. Traveling alone, arriving places where everyone else had their own history, their own routines. She dropped in, captured the glow, and left before she could become part of the picture. The resort felt different, though. Bigger. More private. Like it wasn't used to being observed. The storm battered the windows again, as if to remind her that leaving wasn't an option anymore. As if on cue, there was a loud beep from somewhere above her. Harper jumped, hand flying to her chest. "What now?" she exhaled. A disembodied voice floated down from a speaker tucked discreetly into the wall near the stairs. It was calm, female, soothing in a way that made Harper instantly suspicious. "Attention, guests and staff. Due to worsening weather conditions, all access roads to Hale Summit Resort are now closed. Guests are advised to remain indoors until further notice." Harper's mouth went dry. "Roads are what?" she said, even though she'd heard it perfectly. The voice continued. "The resort will remain fully powered and stocked. Please contact the front desk for assistance." The announcement ended with a soft chime, like this was all part of a gentle spa package. Harper turned in a slow circle, staring at the very empty front desk, the very uncontactable staff, and the very locked door. "Well," she said finally, her voice a little too high, "good thing I have, myself." She lifted her camera bag onto the nearest couch, unzipped it, and pulled out her camera almost on autopilot. The weight of it in her hands calmed her. The familiar buttons and dials grounded her in a way nothing else did. If she was stuck here, she might as well work. Through the viewfinder, the lobby turned from intimidating into interesting. She snapped a shot of the fireplace, the flames caught mid-dance. Click. The tree, standing a little too perfect and alone. Click. The snow raging against the glass, streaking white across the dark background. Click. Each shot was a frame she controlled, something she could choose, capture, keep. She moved slowly around the lobby, hips brushing against plush furniture, boots making muted thuds on the rug. Her breath fogged lightly in the air every time she stopped still long enough. It was warm, but not crowded warm. More like the building was being kept alive for someone who wasn't here yet. A thought prickled at the back of her mind. "Where is everybody?" she asked the chandelier. "Did I crash a private billionaire bunker or something?" She laughed at her own ridiculousness, but the sound was small. The resort, in all its polished grandeur, felt like it was waiting. For staff to appear. For guests to arrive. For a holiday it was determined to keep at arm's length. She made her way behind the grand staircase, following a corridor lined with black and white photographs of mountains in different seasons, summer wildflowers, fall tree lines, winter storms. The brass plaques under each photo listed titles and dates. Her fingers brushed one at random. "First snow," she read softly. 10 years ago. The image was beautiful. Stark, cold, untouched. She wondered who took the photos. Some in-house professional. The mysterious resort owner whose name she'd seen briefly when she booked. Gray, something. Grayson Hale. She'd clicked through the contract too fast, fixated on the all-inclusive stay line and the paycheck attached to the job. Her stomach growled softly, reminding her she'd been surviving on airport pretzels and gas station coffee for the last 12 hours. "Okay. Priority list," she muttered. 1. Do not panic about being snowed in. 2. Find food. 3. Locate a human. 4. Pretend you didn't almost drive off a mountain. She turned back toward the lobby, following the faint smell of something lingering, coffee, maybe, and fresh bread. Her boots squeaked gently as she crossed back over the polished floor. Behind the front desk, tucked to the side, she noticed a small wooden plaque she hadn't seen before. She leaned in to read it. Hale Summit Resort. Private winter operations closed to public from December 15 January 5. Authorized exceptions by approval only. Her eyebrows shot up. Closed, she repeated slowly. From when? She yanked her phone back out, fingers flying across the screen to check the date again, as if that might have magically changed. The 23rd of December. Cool, 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 she said, the word coming out thin. So technically I am not supposed to be here. Her brain replayed the reservation confirmation in her email. The booking site. The limited availability winter rate. Nothing about closed. Had there been fine print? Of course there had been fine print. She'd probably scrolled past it at light speed. A tiny thread of anxiety tugged at her chest. She opened her email app, trying to load the confirmation again. The spinning wheel turned. And turned. And turned. No signal, she said under her breath. Right. Excellent. We love this for me. The fire popped loudly in the hearth, making her jump again. She exhaled slowly. One problem at a time. She was here. The roads were closed. She had a room confirmation somewhere. The building was heated and powered. There was clearly some kind of staff presence. The fire didn't light itself, the coffee didn't pour itself, the announcement didn't make itself. Somewhere in this massive, slightly intimidating snow palace, a human existed. Okay, she said, louder, as if speaking it into reality. Harper Meadows, you are not going to freak out because a luxury resort is temporarily understaffed. You have survived budget hostels with mystery stains. This place has marble. You're fine. She squared her shoulders and marched herself back to the front desk. On the counter, beside the bell, sat a small leather-bound guestbook and a thick, crisp stack of brochures. She flipped one open. The first page was all marketing flair, Hale Summit Resort, a private winter sanctuary. It boasted heated pools, ski-in /ski out access, a world-class spa, a Michelin-starred chef available upon request, and enough features to make Harper mentally add extra zeros to the cost. The second page showed a photo of the resort in clear weather, perched proudly on the mountain, glass windows reflecting bright blue sky, an infinity hot tub steaming against a backdrop of snowy peaks. A man in a dark coat stood on one of the terraces, his face turned away from the camera. Underneath, in small elegant text. Owned and curated by Grayson Hale. She studied the shadowed profile, trying to make out any details. The line of a jaw. The tilt of a head. A sense of distance even in the photo. Grayson Hale, she repeated. The name felt heavy. Final. Owner and curator, huh? Sounds like someone who labels his spice rack. She set the brochure back down gently. Outside, the storm roared louder, if that was possible. The windows trembled in their frames, the mountain reminding everyone exactly who was in charge. Harper turned away from the door fully, making a choice without dramatizing it, staying in the warm, not staring at a storm she couldn't outdrive. She walked toward the fireplace, drawn by the glow, shrugging off her coat as she went. Heat kissed her skin, sending a flush up her neck. She laid the coat carefully over the arm of a nearby chair, then hovered near the fire, rubbing her hands together. It was strangely intimate, being alone in a place like this. It felt like she'd broken in after hours. Like the resort had exhaled all its guests and staff, and now she was standing in its ribcage, listening to it breathe. She sank into one of the armchairs, sinking deeper than she expected, the cushion wrapping around her like a hug she hadn't asked for. Her muscles, stiff from the drive, slowly unwound. Her eyes drifted back to the tree. To the quiet lobby. To the empty staircase. Somewhere above her, a door slammed faintly. She jerked, adrenaline flaring, but then footsteps moved overhead, muted and distant. Staff, maybe. Maintenance. Somebody who had no idea a lone guest had slipped through the cracks. Her heartbeat calmed, but only a little. She curled her feet under herself, letting the fire's warmth seep into her bones. Her camera rested in her lap, fingers still loosely wrapped around it. The flames reflected in the lens like tiny shards of light trapped in glass. This is fine, she told herself, softer now. It's just a storm. It'll pass. You'll take your photos, eat some insanely overpriced soup, and go home with a paycheck and maybe all your limbs. Her gaze slid to the plaque again. Closed to the public. Authorized exceptions by approval only. She hadn't asked who had approved her. She hadn't thought to. To her, it was a job. Another assignment. Another place to pass through, to capture, to leave. She had no idea that the man whose signature sat at the bottom of every contract, whose name was etched into the building's identity, had built this mountain fortress specifically so he could shut the door on December and anyone who tried to celebrate it. She had no idea she had just become the exception to his most sacred rule. Outside, the blizzard wrapped itself tighter around the mountain, sealing her in. Inside, the resort glowed quietly, prepared for a holiday its owner refused to acknowledge. Harper shifted closer to the fireplace, watching the flames dance, oblivious to the shift already happening, to the fact that, somewhere in the distance, a helicopter sat on a private helipad, its pilot watching the storm radar, its passenger already scowling at a calendar date he hated. For now, she knew only this. She was alone in a closed resort on a mountain, snowed in with no way out. And the place, with its quiet tree and half-hearted lights, felt less like a vacation, and more like the opening scene of a story that was about to spin completely out of her control. Chapter 2. The billionaire arrives, and he is not amused. By the time Harper had dozed off in the armchair, the mountain had disappeared completely. The resort lights glowed against the storm like a stubborn little pocket of warmth, but beyond the glass, there was nothing. No slope, no trees, no sky. Just white. The blizzard had swallowed Aspen whole. Far above the resort, in the kind of air normal people didn't voluntarily fly through, a helicopter sliced through the storm like a bad decision with rotor blades. The pilot's hands were steady on the controls, but his jaw was tight, eyes flicking between the whiteout outside and the instruments inside. The wind kept trying to shove the helicopter off course. He kept refusing to let it. Behind him, buckled in and wearing an expression like the weather owed him a personal apology, sat Grayson Hale. He wore black. Not the soft, cozy black of sweaters and scarves, but sharp, deliberate black, tailored coat, gloves, perfectly pressed shirt. His dark hair was swept back neatly, even now, like it knew better than to misbehave. The only color on him was the faint bronze of his skin and the cool steel blue of his eyes. At the moment, those eyes were fixed on the storm below like he was mentally trying to delete it. "How is it this bad?" he said, more to himself than to the pilot. "Mountain weather, sir," the pilot answered into his headset, trying for neutral. It picked up faster than forecast. We'll be on the pad in 3. Grayson grunted. He didn't like variables. He liked charts, forecasts, schedules that actually meant something. Weather was one of the few things money couldn't buy into submission, and he took that personally. He glanced at the window again, but there was nothing to see except whirling white and the faint outline of the resort growing larger below. A cluster of lights in the middle of a storm. He should have been in New York. That was the plan. Board meetings, year-end numbers, a quiet suite in a glass tower with blackout curtains and room service that didn't come with forced holiday cheer. Aspen was supposed to be for staff only this week, his once-a-year private retreat, curate, controlled, completely insulated from December nonsense. A notification on his phone buzzed again in his coat pocket, even though he'd already checked it 3 times. One guest. One name on the system that should have been blank. He pulled the phone out again anyway, as if the screen might have corrected itself while he wasn't looking. Hale Summit Reservations active occupancy, 1. Meadows, Harper checked in. His jaw tightened. There it was. 3 words and a name, glowing calmly in his hand, like they weren't a direct violation of his most inflexible rule. The 15th of December to the 5th of January, no guests. No events. No decorations beyond what the staff insisted on as a bare minimum. No corporate clients trying to make Christmas a networking opportunity. No strangers wandering his halls talking about holiday magic and miracles. And absolutely, categorically, no strangers trapped on his mountain out of season. Yet. Sir, the pilot said. We're approaching the pad. Final descent. Grayson exhaled once through his nose, forcing his fingers to unclench around the phone. Fine. Take us down. He slipped the phone back into his coat pocket with clinical precision, as if not looking at the name might make it less real. It didn't. The helicopter angled downward, rotors fighting the wind, slicing through the snow. The resort rooftop came into view, the landing pad, the curved edges of the building, glass structures catching what little light the storm allowed. To anyone else, it would have looked like the setting for a grand holiday advertisement, luxurious mountain hideaway, private helicopter, man in black arriving to celebrate something expensive. Grayson Hale looked at it and saw only one thing, an unwanted variable. The helicopter's landing skids kissed the pad with a subtle jolt, and the rotors spun down slowly, the whine fading into a dull roar of the storm. Snow swirled across the pad, coating the painted lines in seconds. A staff member in a heavy parka ran toward the helicopter, head down, one hand shielding his face from the wind. He darted forward to open the door as soon as the blades slowed enough. Cold wind hit Grayson like a wall the second the door opened. Snowflakes stung his face, catching on his lashes. His coat snapped dramatically in the wind as he stepped out, not that he'd ever admit anything he did was dramatic. Mr. Hale, the staff member yelled over the storm. This way, sir. Grayson nodded once, sharp, and followed him toward the rooftop access door, his shoes somehow not slipping on the icy surface. The snow tried to push them sideways. Grayson ignored it. The staffer didn't dare. Inside the stairwell, the sound of the storm muffled immediately, replaced by the hum of the building, ventilation, generators, quiet luxury working behind the scenes. Grayson stripped off his gloves one finger at a time, his movements controlled, precise. Status. The staffer, mid-30s, flushed from the cold, badge proclaiming him Daniel Operations Manager, shut the rooftop door tightly behind them and let out a breath he'd probably been holding since the helicopter approached. "Sir, we're fully powered," Daniel said quickly, falling into step beside him as they descended. "Backup generators are on standby. We stocked the kitchen for the holiday period as scheduled. Staff is on site per the private winter protocol. All external access roads have just been officially closed." "I heard the announcement," Grayson said. "What I didn't hear was how a guest got into my closed resort." His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. It stayed even, almost conversational, but there was a steel thread running through it that made Daniel visibly swallow. "Yes, sir." That. They reached the landing and turned into a hallway that led to the top of the grand staircase overlooking the lobby. The warm glow of the chandeliers spilled up toward them, accompanied by the low crackle of the fire. Grayson's hand brushed the polished railing lightly, more out of habit than need. He knew every inch of this building, from the rooftop pad to the boiler room. He paid for every square foot. He chose every material, every vendor, every detail that mattered. Except, apparently, the part where someone had overridden his very clear seasonal restriction. "Explain," he said. Daniel's gaze flicked down the stairs briefly, then back to his boss. "We received a reservation from a travel magazine partner, sir. It came in through the editorial collaboration channel we set up in the fall. The dates were misaligned with the closure window. Abby in reservations assumed it had your approval because it was flagged as priority media. She processed it before we realized the system hadn't blocked the dates like it should have." Grayson's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Why didn't the system block them?" "We're still investigating that, Mr. Hale. We think it might have been a calendar exemption created for your mother's potential holiday event and..." He stopped himself, realizing he was saying too much. Grayson's eyes sharpened. And the exemption might have accidentally applied to the entire property instead of just the ballroom, Daniel finished, words tumbling out. "It's a settings error, sir. It wasn't intentional." They reached the top of the staircase. Below them, the lobby spread out like a scene in a catalogue, fire burning, lights glowing, the tree with its carefully restrained decorations standing near the windows. And in one of the armchairs near the fireplace, curled up sideways with her knees tucked in and her head tilted against the cushion, was a stranger. Her coat lay folded neatly over the arm of the chair. A camera rested on her lap, her hand still loosely draped over it like she'd fallen asleep guarding it. Her curls framed her face in soft, slightly messy waves. In the firelight, her skin looked warm, cheeks still faintly flushed from the cold. Grayson stopped. "There," Daniel said quietly, unnecessarily. Harper slept on, completely oblivious to the storm, the helicopter, the approaching billionaire, and the silent staffer who had just realized he might have to update his resume. For a moment, Grayson's expression didn't move at all. Nothing in his face gave away what he was thinking. Then his jaw flexed. "One guest," he said, almost to himself. "Yes, sir. In my closed resort," he added. "Yes, sir. During the only 3-week stretch of the year I specifically carved out to avoid." He cut himself off, as if even saying the word might summon something cheerful in an ugly sweater. Daniel nodded once, tightly. He knew. Everyone in core staff knew. Hale Summit in December was not a winter wonderland. It was a controlled environment. There could be a tree if the staff insisted. Minimal lights. No carolers, no seasonal packages, no mistletoe, no Santa experiences, no jingling anything. It was in the manual, for heaven's sake. The Christmas ban, unofficial title, very official policy. And now, in the middle of his carefully controlled no-holiday zone, there was her. Grayson watched Harper's breathing, slow and steady, chest rising and falling under her sweater. She looked completely at ease, the kind of ease people came here to buy. It irritated him. Not her, exactly. The situation. The feeling that someone had climbed over his invisible line, that his sanctuary had been breached while he was busy dealing with investors and year-end spreadsheets. He shifted his gaze to the tree. He'd allowed it this year for one reason only, staff morale. Rosalind, his mother, had called it inhuman not to have at least one tree. They'd had that argument 2 weeks ago. He'd conceded the tree. He hadn't conceded anything else. Yet here sat a travel photographer with a camera and no idea she was intruding on the one place he refused to let December touch him. "Does she know?" he asked, eyes still on the sleeping figure. "No," Daniel echoed. "That we're closed to the public," Grayson said patiently. "That she was never supposed to be able to book this week." Daniel swallowed. "I don't believe so, sir. She said she was on assignment. The magazine negotiated the stay on their side. She seemed under the impression everything was perfectly normal. Did no one think to tell her otherwise?" "We were going to address it when you arrived," Daniel said quickly. "But with the storm moving in so fast, we thought it best to keep her here rather than send her back down the mountain, and then the roads were shut and now she's stuck," Grayson finished, voice flat. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Grayson dragged his gaze back to Harper. He'd always had a strange sensitivity to Christmas. Not to the religious aspects, not really. To the culture around it. The forced optimism. The insistence that everyone must be joyful, must gather, must relive old memories like they didn't cut both ways. There had been a December once, years ago, when he'd played along. When there had been a tree with real ornaments, laughter spilling through the house, his father's booming voice telling stories over mulled wine. That had been the last one. After that, he'd decided he preferred December quiet. Efficient. Treated like any other month. No expectations, no elaborate traditions, no fragile things that could be broken. He built an entire mountain refuge to support that decision. And still, the universe had managed to sneak a guest into it. He felt something prickly behind his ribs. Irritation. Resentment. An almost offended feeling at the idea that his one sanctuary had somehow become someone else's workplace. The irony didn't amuse him. "What do you want us to do?" Daniel asked carefully. "Do?" Grayson repeated. "Yes, sir." Daniel shifted his weight. "We can arrange transport if there's a break in the weather tomorrow. Or we can move her to staff quarters to keep the main lodge fully private. We can." "You'll do nothing until I speak with her," Grayson said, cutting him off. "This is my building. My closure policy. My liability. I want to know exactly how she got here and what she thinks she's doing." His eyes flicked to the camera still resting in Harper's hand. "And what she plans to do with those photos," he added. Daniel nodded. "Understood." Grayson descended the first few steps of the staircase slowly, his gaze never leaving Harper. The slight creak of the wood under his weight echoed faintly in the lobby. She didn't stir. Her eyelashes cast soft shadows on her cheeks. One curl had fallen forward across her forehead. The firelight painted her in shades of gold and amber, turning the whole scene into something almost too picturesque. A sleeping woman by the fire in a mountain lodge, storm raging outside. It would have made a perfect holiday card photo. That alone annoyed him. He stopped halfway down, fingers resting on the banister, and forced himself to think like the businessman he was. Facts. There was a guest. The guest was stuck for the time being. He did not permit holiday guests during this window. However, he also did not eject guests into life-threatening storms just to avoid tinsel. He could deal with this. He always dealt with things. "We'll maintain her as a guest, for now," he said over his shoulder. "Give her a room. Keep her off the guest records beyond what's already in the system. No photos of me. No photos of staff unless cleared. No mention of this place being closed. Until I decide otherwise, she's a temporary exception, nothing more." "Yes, Mr. Hale. And I want a full report on how that media channel was configured," he added. "Tonight." "Of course." Grayson resumed his descent, each step measured, until he reached the bottom. He moved closer to the fire, the heat reaching out to meet him. Up close, he could see the faint smudge of tiredness under Harper's eyes, the relaxed slack of her mouth. She'd clearly been through a long day to fall asleep in a public lobby like this. He remembered the snow reports he'd glanced at before leaving the city. He imagined her car on those roads, the wind throwing the vehicle around like a toy. It was not ideal. He could acknowledge that privately without letting it soften his stance. Standing there, framed by firelight on one side and storm-muted windows on the other, Grayson looked like the resort personified, polished, controlled, expensive, and not remotely interested in being interrupted. This was his domain. His rules. His December blackout. He looked down at the uninvited exception to all of that and felt something shift, tiny, imperceptible, like the first crack in ice. He didn't recognize it. He wouldn't have admitted it if he had. What he did recognize, loud and clear, was the irritation thrumming steadily through him. The sense of a boundary crossed without permission. Of an intrusion into the one space he kept separate from everything else. "Sir." Daniel's voice floated down the stairs. "Should I wake her?" Grayson's gaze lingered on Harper for a beat longer. "No," he said finally. "Let her sleep. For now." Because he wasn't going to have this conversation with someone half asleep by a fireplace, disoriented and shivering. He wasn't cruel. He was efficient. When she woke, he would be ready. He would make it very clear, in his calm, measured way, that this was not some cozy little winter getaway for her to photograph. That he did not host holiday tourists. That she was here on sufferance, dictated by snow and liability and nothing more. He would not be charmed. He would not be amused. And he would certainly not let one unexpected guest unravel a rule he'd held like armor for years. Above them, the storm hurled itself harder against the glass, as if trying to hammer a point home. Deep in the armchair, Harper shifted slightly, nuzzling deeper into the cushion, completely unaware that the man who owned this mountain had just arrived, and that he was very much not thrilled to find her at the heart of his carefully guarded, Christmas-free fortress.
Thanks for listening to Billionaire Romance Stories, where love meets luxury in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. We love hearing your favorite twists and favorite theories. And don't forget to ring that bell, because in this world of yachts, secrets, and luxurious romance, the next story is always one click away.